Good afternoon. I'm really happy to be here, back at memoQ, seeing a lot of longtime friends. I want to talk about things I think are going to happen. Jay already gave us a really cool introduction. Some things I want to take it another step ahead and talk about more things that I think might be happening for us as language professionals. The big question that I hear from a lot of people is, where do we stand? There's this tsunami coming at us called AI, generative AI. And there's little old us over here. So what I've seen a lot of businesses do in this kind of situation is what they call a SWOT analysis. So given the situation, let's assess our strengths, our weaknesses, any opportunities we see, and any threats, okay? But I don't think that's the right order. So I'm going to switch around the order and do it a little differently. First thing is threats. It's a jungle out there, okay? So we have what I'm calling memoQ. You ever hear of FANG, F-A-A-N-G? Right, the largest companies? So these are the largest companies in the world. Meta, Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, NVIDIA, Google, OpenAI. These are like trillion-dollar companies, okay? They're apex predators, and they want to eat our lunch, and maybe our livers too. Okay, so this is scary. It's a scary situation. They have explicitly said they don't need us anymore. Nobody needs us anymore. We can do everything we want with tech. Okay, so that's definitely a threat. The other threat is that they have very, very big megaphones. Okay, so what they say, yes, of course, they have a huge budget for brainwashing, but they focus only on their use cases, only on their way of seeing the world. Okay, so what they end up trying to convince people is that coverage is more important than accuracy. Novelty is more important than reliability. Hype is more important than truth. Quantity is more important than quality. Why? Because it's their business model. They need eyes. They sell eyeballs. Google does, for example. Okay? So that leads them to promote these. And of course, they're selling tech. So what do they want everyone to believe? That tech is the best solution. That people, they might be helpful sometimes. Okay? So these are threats that we face, all of us. What are our chances of getting past these gorillas? We have weaknesses. We have really fragmented organization. Okay? There's a very little public awareness of what we do and why we do it and how we add value. We have this delivery speed that's human scale. We know about domains and vocabulary that's tiny, tiny, person-sized. Okay? We produce translations that are only as valuable as the original, and we have no control over the original. And there are a lot of other challenges that we face. Okay, so it's really easy to think that the time is here. This time it's for real. Except you can't imagine these guys dancing at the memoQ gala dinner, right? Okay, these are our future colleagues. This is going to be really funny a couple of years from now at memoQ to watch them doing the dancing. Notice that this slide is the same one I used how long ago did we use this? Goodness, at least 2012, more than 10 or 15 years ago. Okay? Because with the resurgence of translation technologies, the worry persists. Okay? And it's growing, right? Because we have all these people with very big megaphones saying we don't need translators anymore. Okay? So why do things seem so terrible to everybody? I like this one. This is, again, it wasn't OpenAI, but it was a similar kind of thing. What's going on is we see lots of smoke and mirrors. Lots of conversations to confuse us, to confuse everyone. Lots of promises, lots of predictions, real solutions, and not so much. Okay? So this is what's going on. Now, we're starting to see more conversations about, well, this AI stuff doesn't really work, or not good enough, or needs more work. And all we hear from the big guys is, well, we'll get there. It's coming. It's coming. We have quantity now. Quality will come at some point. Okay? So this is what we really want to know, is what's really coming next for language professionals. And I hear this all the time from translators, from technical writers, from a range of people who think that we're going to be, well, we probably will be quite a bit affected by the progress in AI. So, mind you, this is a crystal ball. Okay? It's kind of murky. It's not really clear what we'll see. But this is what I see coming. The best way, the way I like to think about it is the best way to predict the future is to build it yourself the way you want it. I really like this quote. Okay? So we start with our strengths. We're doing a SWOT analysis. Let's think of strengths. You know this guy? He's Austrian. He used to be my governor. The key thing we want to think about and make very clear to everyone are the things that we can do that engineers cannot. The things that we can do that computers cannot. Okay? In marketing speak, what's our added value? What are our differentiators? That's how we have to present ourselves. So in the first place, I really like this one. If you ask an engineer about text or language, this is the response you get. So I call it kryptonite for engineers. They can do anything except text and language. Okay? And you ask them about it, and they say, oh, you mean unstructured data. Unstructured data means random stuff? That's what it is? Okay? So we have a fighting chance. All we see is structure. Structure all over the place. This word is related to this word is to the other word. This sentence is related to that sentence. For the engineers, it's just stuff. Okay, so there are a lot of things that we have that we have to make clear to everyone and say, engineers are really good at this and this and this and this, but we have superpowers too. Okay? We have a very deep understanding of text and language. We can understand the difference between localizing content, like how much sales tax to pay, versus translating strings. They don't do that so well. A lot of these things they just get puzzled about. We know the value of non-routine translations. Okay, a large language model has a little operator in there, and it says argmax, which means give me the most likely or most routine translation to continue this. Well, what about the other ones? There's a lot of value in non-routine translations. We know the difference between reusing translations and regenerating them, between translating itself and recreating stuff. Okay? Go to a bunch of engineers who are developing first world-class AI, and they'll say, what the hell are you talking about? Okay? We have domain expertise. Okay? And I think this is for translators and technical writers, this is going to be more and more important, a more important way of differentiating our contribution to a machine's contribution. We can do things like understand audience awareness. We have audience awareness. So we can understand if something has weird connotations, or is offensive, or appropriate. Remember the Microsoft bot, Tay, what was it? Tay? I don't remember what it was, went off the rails and started spewing hate speech because we didn't have any of this, okay? We also know about author personas. We can write something so that the writer, the author, sounds like an idiot or like a genius, even if we're saying the same things, okay? That's really hard to do with any AI kinds of stuff. Anyone here work for an LSP? Oh, guess what? Look at the last item. Extreme adaptability. Try to get computers to do that. Oh no, one single interface, this syntax, no variation. If it varies, it crashes. Well, at LSPs, we excel at flexibility. So these are superpowers we can build on. These are things that we know how to do that computers can't and that engineers don't even understand. Okay? So how can we put this together with what's coming in AI? Well, in a nutshell, what I think is coming in AI is more text. Right now, we're doing things with text. We're excelling at processing text. But I think more of it is coming. Okay? So that means we're going to need more from and more of language professionals, the way I look at it, at least. Okay? So think of it for one example. Right now, we use text as a steering wheel in LLMs. They call it prompt engineering. Okay? But who better than language professionals to help understand which kinds of prompts are more effective or which phrasing leads to less errors? Okay? Engineers try it at random. We don't. We know what's going on. It doesn't understand one of those. Okay? There are opportunities, I think, ahead for language professionals. That's what I'm talking about now. Jay mentioned multimodal LLMs, where you have data from audio and data from video and data from text and data from images. And we can throw them into a pot and stir them around and say, hey, give me a video about Peter surfing down a mountainside. Okay, and there you go. Peter's surfing down a mountainside. Okay? But the way those are built, they use the text as the pivot. Okay? You attach video to text, you attach audio to text, you attach images to text. But what if the text is wrong? Okay? What if it's ambiguous? What if it's offensive? We have all of these things that our engineering friends don't really have much of a clue about. And this makes things work way worse than they should. So it's another way of thinking about text. And it's another example of why text is becoming more and more important in AI. So again, there are opportunities for us. To make this technology progress, we need more language professionals. Okay? The key discovery that we have with ChatGPT is LLMs are the ultimate interface. They're great. They're natural. You don't have to do anything really special. You just ask a question. This is wonderful. But how can we model audience appropriateness? How can we get the LLM to create appealing or engaging text? Or make culturally relevant or understandable text? These are all things that are coming, and for which we have our opportunities because we need more language professionals to do this. I like to think of text as a point of view. So think about the news. You have the same story, the same event, but in a newspaper in Budapest, they're going to describe it in a very different way from a newspaper in Hong Kong, even though it's the same event. So there's all this point of view information that's wrapped up in there, but an LLM will munge them all together and just say the most common neutral form of saying things is this. Okay? On top of that, most languages aren't covered. I think Earl had an article, Earl Lummel from Common Sense Advisory, had a post a few weeks back showing that LLMs cover about 17 languages. 17. That's not a lot. They're just the ones for which we have oceans of data. Okay? So if we're going to move on to other languages, we need to know things like, well, what kind of data would be essential to have to get a language rolling? How can we recognize and respect the different kinds of worldviews that show up in different languages? We can't do any of this yet. Okay? Again, I call this an opportunity. Because if we want the technology to move ahead, we're going to need language professionals and not just engineers. So this is a picture of the day-to-day of any CEO, basically. You know, major distress, I am in deep trouble, all sorts of horrible things are happening. My job is risk management. Okay, and I ask myself, well, why do we have text in the first place? Why do we write all this stuff in a company, and why do we translate it, and why in so many languages? So one way of looking at it is text. The text that we create are for risk mitigation. So that's a key business function for any kind of content that we produce. So we want to use text to avoid the risk of sluggish sales or no sales. What do we create? Product descriptions. We want to avoid the risk of reputation and brand. We create high quality documents so that our brand is perceived as high quality. We want to avoid legal risks regarding compliance. So we create documents about compliance. Okay? Same thing, we have internal documents to avoid the risk of higher development and support costs, and so on and so forth. If we don't have documents, then it takes us longer to create our products, and our products don't fit the market as well. And we make ill-informed business decisions because we didn't have that in-country report to count on. So this is very, very important. We have lots of content because we have lots of risks to minimize. And this is one of the key ways in which we all add value. So there are opportunities here. But I've never seen our talents, our skills, sold in this way. Right? It may be a different way to work. There's another one that I want to talk about too, and this we start to see in people who work in marketing and everything, where text is, as it were, a mirror of the soul. Okay? Text expresses personality or brand for companies, directly and indirectly. So the way you phrase stuff reflects your values and your assumptions and your training, and it reflects emotions and your goals and your intentions. Can you get a machine to churn these out? Not if you ask engineers, because they don't know what you're talking about. Okay? So the challenge here is, how can we get machines at least to help with this, to recognize individual perspectives, and to identify and suppress things like hate speech, okay, and antisocial points of view. Do you get the impression that there's lots left to do? Thank you. Okay, so that means there are opportunities for us, because to get any of this stuff done, you need experts in language, right? Oh yeah, this is the way the engineers react to this conversation. It's like the mirror of the what? Okay, so can organizations do any of these things well without language professionals? I would say no. Okay, and I think this is going to become clearer and clearer as we progress with AIs that don't have any of these skills. Okay, so this is especially important for high impact content. Things like marketing came up, okay, things that impact brand. But a lot of the remaining work still has language workers delivering text as data. This has come up several times, even here in this workshop, okay? And you see the pictures here of these workers in a gold mine in Brazil. Do they look happy? Do they look well paid? But they're producing gold, okay? And this is the kind of situation that we want to work hard to avoid, where we're just churning out dirt that someone else can turn into value. So I wrote an article a couple of months back called "Data is the New Mud." And in fact, there are a lot of similarities. If you have too much data, which most places do, it's a huge problem. It's very expensive to store it. You can't throw it away because nobody knows how to throw away the parts that aren't important. If you don't have enough data, it's too little data, that's a big problem. If you have bad data, it's a big problem. If you have wrong data, it's a big problem. Data is a real pain in the butt. Okay? Versioning, extracting value from the data, a whole new science arose because we had too much data around. Data science is there as just, hey, get some value out of this data. I'm spending a fortune to store it. We have to get some value back. Okay? So looking at our work as creating more data, maybe is not so valuable. Data is hard to control, to transport, to store. It's all hard. So in a sense, we're actually making life more difficult for our clients because we're happily creating mountains of data, mountains of content. That becomes harder and harder for them to manage. Okay, so we still have opportunities to continue along these lines, but I want to think about something else. How could we make things simpler for clients. And maybe produce a higher value product for us. So I think there are more opportunities for us. And one of them is to, instead of delivering data, we can deliver something that's much more valuable, which is knowledge, and more reliable. And that would lead us to look, that requires us to look at text as ore, like iron ore or gold ore, that we can transform into ingots of knowledge. And this is where we go into knowledge graphs, because text, when we distill it and compact it and refine it and purify it, we end up with knowledge, okay? So one of the things that we can do is add value to text, not only by creating it, by translating it, as it were, into knowledge graphs. Let's talk about those for a little bit. Just a quick and dirty introduction. So a knowledge graph, this is a graph. You see like a network? That's where the graph part comes from, okay? And each of the circles represents a concept. And each of the little lines between the circles represents a kind of representation. They're not labeled here, so you don't know what they are. This is just an artistic version kind of thing. And then we have things like triples or facts, which is two little circles just linked by a little line. Okay, there's 3 parts to it, so that's why it's called a triple. And there are variations on these things. And then you have something called graph neighborhoods or neighborhoods. So all the other things that are connected to this one here. And these are key concepts in graphs. What we're trying to do here is represent facts about the world, not about strings, okay? So we're capturing, as Peter said, human knowledge in a form that not only humans can use, but in a form that computers can use. Okay, so knowledge graphs are collections of facts about things in the world that have explicit, computer-interpretable meanings. Have you ever heard of LLMs with meanings? People kind of fudge it and say, oh, there's really cool semantics with kind of reasons. But when you open it up, you can't find the meanings. Okay? So concepts here then are collections or neighborhoods of facts. So they're like definitions. And each of them can have a wide variety of labels, like dog, pooch, mutt, chien, cachorro, hund, whatever. But they're 2 separate things. So the concept on the inside contains facts about the components and characteristics, so we can unpack it later. It's not just a label, which is how LLMs do things. You have a label and you throw around labels. And if you ask the machine, well, what's inside this thing here? It doesn't have anything to tell you. And again, concepts are related in many different ways. So you've probably heard about taxonomies and ontologies. Well, there's different subparts of a knowledge graph. Making sense so far? Okay. So this concept development is very much like what we've been doing for a long time in terminology work. Okay? The difference is we have it formatted in such a way that computers can leverage it more easily. So, knowledge graphs, if you read from left to right, are usually stored like this in text form as a list of triples, a gazillion of them, kind of like this. If you look in Wikidata, so there's a version of Wikipedia that's called Wikidata, and it's in this format. This format, I'm pointing in the wrong place. Okay, and there are, at the moment, well, the last time I checked, there were 20 billion facts like this. So there's a lot of stuff to work with. Does this seem difficult to do? It's not really. Not for us. But engineers get their eyes crossed when they look at this stuff and they say, why? What are you doing? Okay? So it's really interesting to know that in the computer, they're not strings. They're IDs. They're stored as IDs. So you have P, blah, 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 Q, blah, 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 blah. Okay, all IDs. But then we have a little fact in there that says this ID in English is usually called this. So we can recover the labels and display them like this for human consumption. So that means that each label here represents a collection of facts. It's not just a string. It's a collection of facts, like what we call definitions. So these are the concepts. These are how we're implementing concepts. What do we got here? And then, of course, everyone's going to ask, but why bother? Okay? Well, the example that I like to use is this. In today's medical AI, what they do is they take a list of symptoms, and they have a label for a diagnosis, and they do a correlation. But they're assuming that the symptoms are independent of each other. They're just unrelated. That's a huge assumption. How can we double check? How can we know how can we explain and verify if we don't know why those particular symptoms are there? And what happens is we get spurious correlations. And this is why we have hallucinations in LLMs. Okay? So then the next step is going to be, oh, look at all this stuff inside the circle. This is the stuff we know about why and how these symptoms are related to these syndromes and causes. Okay, myxedemic coma is caused by and causes. We have all of this information here. Physicians have to hand, okay, but the AIs do not use. But this is where we're going next. This is a kind of knowledge graph. Okay? My big question is this one. Who has the skills to build this from the texts where this information is already available? Anyone raise your hand? We do. It takes solid language ability to be able to do this. Okay, so why would you want to do it? Knowledge graphs are going to power a next generation of a wide variety of tools. The medical example is just one. For AI, this is a stumbling block for engineers, big companies developing AIs. They hallucinate too much because they don't have enough knowledge. They just have text. So what can we use them for? Well, guess what? Now we can start building tools where we can index segments based on meaning, not on the particular word that's there. Okay? We can spot synonyms, and we can see where there's a meaning overlap. We can create contexts for the RAG applications, like our AGT, okay, that are more concentrated. So we have more information in a single triple, right? We can fit more of that information in the same context. So it's easier to process and it fits more. We can do more things with it. So now we're starting to talk about tools for meaning-based quality management. We can start to think about how to evaluate and measure how accurate a translation is. Okay, or two versions in English, for that matter. And so on and so forth. So it's going to be possible to detect contradictions. We have this a lot of times. You have from one version of documentation to the next, we have contradictory instructions. And this, again, the last item is probably the most important one. We can start thinking about automated reasoning when we have knowledge that's explicitly there, like Jay said. Intelligence is manipulating knowledge, not just strings. Okay? So this is what we're doing here. It's usually good to contrast knowledge graphs and large language models because they're used in similar contexts. So people kind of mix them up sometimes. All right? Knowledge graphs model facts about things in the world. LLMs model sequences of letter strings. They're different things. They're different topics. There's a big heads up because they're complementary. They have different information. That's our first clue that using them together will be super helpful. Okay? And what are they made up of? Concepts and relations on the one hand, and strings, language strings on the other. They have different strengths. So LLMs are really good for capturing linguistic diversity and patterns, and they're good for human-machine communication. But knowledge graphs are very, very good for factual accuracy and domain knowledge and enabling reasoning because they focus on semantics. That's what we're trying to do with knowledge graphs, is capture semantics explicitly so we can store it and manipulate it. And LLMs give us a focus on syntax and strings and sequences. So why do LLMs work if they don't have information about meaning? Well, it's because we're reading them. And we see the string and say, great, that makes sense, but the meaning's not there. The computer's not using meaning to manipulate them. We are. Okay? So let me jump past this one, because there are lots of other things going on here. And in LLMs, we're seeing now that they're almost ready for showtime. Okay? But we see things like there are a lot of languages that aren't covered. And they don't come with a warning and say, we don't do very good with this language. They say, we have this language here. But they don't tell you how much training material was there. So that language coverage is an issue. I saw a whole workshop on multilingual large language models. And the topic that was most common there was alignment. How can you chop up this sentence into pieces that you can align with pieces from this other language? Well, that's great if it's English and French, but if you're talking about other languages, of other language families, then it starts to get really hairy, and it's not working very well. Okay, so LLMs, a lot of times, are slow. They time out because they're so slow. Not clear to me that they can help with content localization. They'll give you translations, but they won't fix how much the sales tax is supposed to be in your target locale, and so on and so forth. So we have style guides that we have to deal with. Can we put them in some of that information into a prompt? We can, but we can't control it very well. Okay? And of course, like we said before, you all know, there are issues with hallucinations. And if you put all that effort into building your prompts, we get a new version of the software, and what happens? Or somebody changes from OpenAI to Anthropic or to Claude or something like this, they don't work the same way. Okay? So it's a questionable, oh yeah, by the way, prompts, they're there to coax the AI because they don't follow orders. Right? We kind of nudge them in a particular direction and hope they work with us. Okay? But these are opportunities for us as well, because many of these are linguistic issues. All right, in localization, LLMs are not going to go away. They're doing a really important job for us. But what's been showing up in the research literature, knowledge graphs are really good to guide training of LLMs, to make better LLMs, to align data sources that are in different silos in different parts of the company, to accelerate fine-tuning, or to improve RAG, things like NAGT. They're also used as filters when we get the output for the LLM. They have guardrails, they call them. So they're filters so that the LLM doesn't say anything unacceptable. But they're really crude kinds of things. And now using knowledge graphs for that makes them much more robust. Okay, so there are lots of different ways of using knowledge graphs for building LLMs, and in particular for localization. And that's because the knowledge graphs add meaning to the AIs that we have already. Okay, what do we have here? So that means there are more opportunities for us to use them, to build them, to improve them. So where we're moving toward, I think, this is my crystal ball, as Peter requested, we're moving to this situation where we have knowledge graphs everywhere. And we build them fact by fact. And for us, it's interesting because craftsmanship counts. The key thing here is the reliability of the knowledge sources that we have. And we want to be able to build them so we can share reliable knowledge and not just generate throwaway text. Okay, so we're accumulating valuable resources. And this helps support the creation of new knowledge. This is why we're doing it. We can do it for rare domains and for common domains. So that means there's a lot of work to be done. We want to be able to access them through all kinds of languages, not just the 5 or 10 biggest languages. So we can build them and use them through AI tooling. It's not giving up on AI, it's enriching AI with our skills and our knowledge. But it will only work if we have enough language professionals doing this stuff. So rather than thinking that we have less work to do, I would rather say we have many times more work to do with AI. So what's the next new normal going to be for us? Well, threats that I think are smaller than they seem. Weaknesses that I think are much less important than they feel. Strengths that are becoming more valuable with the passing of time. And what I hope to show you here is a very wide range of opportunities to use our skills. Thanks for your attention.
Questions, comments? I'll just randomly give this to somebody unless... I'm sure you wanted to ask a question.
Okay, we have one.
Thanks, Mike, for enthusiastic and great presentation. So I'm Gaetan from Six Continents, and you're stating it yourself here. Thanks for your attention. Among the threats, don't you think that, unfortunately, the world is going for attention, indeed, rather than just, or rather than knowledge? And isn't it just a bit contradicting the opportunities you stated? And again, I say this, it is like unfortunate it is happening like that, but.
So I think you're referring to my second slide, the second threat I mentioned, which is the very big megaphones, okay? And they come from the business model that some of the biggest companies use, like Google, okay? And Google's not really worried about the truth of what's published, is they just want to get your attention. The point I wanted to make, though, is that there are a lot of other applications, there are a lot of other industries outside of this bubble of the Mamango group, where it's very important to have accurate and reliable information. Biomedicine and financial services are investing very heavily, both of them, in knowledge graphs and ontologies, okay? Because in those other business models, you can think of, precision manufacturing, like our friends in Germany. It's very important. So my whole point was, yes, you're absolutely right. The big gorillas are trading in attention, but they're not the only thing that's happening, and maybe not the most important thing that's happening. Thank you. Thanks for that. Istvan, what are you going to do to me?
Ask you a question.
Good.
So, one of the things about knowledge graphs is that it sounds great. Ontologies have been around for a long time as well. But at the same time, we are here in this room. And let's say we are really interested in how to harvest those opportunities out there.
Yep.
And one of the things that I don't really know is how can we, as language professionals that care about remaining language professionals,
yes,
get started? On whose account do we get started? Because we are so used to serving others, but most likely this is not about serving others. And how would you get started, if you have been in this industry of translations? How would you get involved?
Interesting.
So that we avoid the mamangos.
So I had most of my experience in one of the mamangos, okay? So I started the Knowledge Graph group. I was one of the people who started the Knowledge Graph group at LinkedIn, which is part of Microsoft. Okay, and they brought me in because the engineers were making it. It's literally what someone came to me and said, "Hey, look, the engineers are making a real mess. Can you step in and please help a bit?" Okay, so we created an organization because of this. They were doing wonderful things like saying, "Okay, the key concepts are the 5,000 most frequent terms." Does that ring any bells for you? That something might go wrong? They didn't eliminate any synonyms. So you get these lists of the most important, the most frequent jobs out there, and you have programmer and software engineer and senior software engineer, two separate jobs, okay, and programmer. So they had lots of things like that when we started. I'm not sure right now how we can get started. This is coming. It seems to me very clearly that it's coming. I see a lot of work being done, and I see a lot of gaps in what's being deployed, and there's research in the background. So Peter asked me to talk about what's coming. This is coming. I think it's a perfect fit for our skill set. It's not here yet in terms of opportunities. I don't hear people knocking on doors, oh, we need a knowledge graph, can you help us do this? Okay? So I think as a community, we probably need to do some samples to show the value of our work in this context. Right? And the good news is that even very small knowledge graphs, they don't have to be humongous, like a Google-size knowledge graph or Microsoft. These are huge. Even very small ones. We built very small ones for LinkedIn, and they had a huge, oversized impact. Okay? The story I like to tell is the first project we worked on, we just made a distinction. The most frequent job title was manager, and we just made a distinction between people manager and resource manager. And just doing that systematically improved search, improved recommendations, did all sorts of things. So even on a small scale, they have a really significant impact of taking search, for example, away from string-based search to concept-based search. Jay, uh-oh, now I'm in trouble.
Not an uh-oh. I'll have a question, but can I
Yes,
offer a quick answer
of course.
to that? So one thing that I say to LSPs and to translators is that the way to approach a customer for that is to say, you have invested X number of dollars over the course of the last X number of years in producing all of this data. And now it's time to unlock the value in that data. And one way to increase the value in that data is by doing this. Yeah. And we have a service to help you do this. Pretty simple, right? When you think of it that way.
Yeah.
Question.
Uh-oh, okay. Peter's going to block you. He almost tackled you.
The question is, so you and I have been asked the question by translators 100 times, if not more. Why should I be contributing to my own demise? Right? So it used to be a post-editing question. Why would I post-edit if you're going to use post-edited content to train an MT system that's going to take my work away? How would you respond in this case to somebody saying, why should I help build up knowledge graphs if it's going to make AI more intelligent and it's going to more likely threaten my job? So I'm just saying, you've heard it before.
As you could guess, I don't see it that way. So in this context, what happens is instead of having lots of translations from one language to the next, right? You would have a translation from your language to a knowledge graph kind of language, which is difficult enough to use our skills, okay, and keep us busy for a long time. And then we have the opposite direction. Given all of this information in knowledge graph form, how can we translate that into a good sentences in our language? So it's still translation work, as I see it, and I don't think it undermines our skills. I think it uses our skills better than before. So it's not like we're handing off our skills to the machine, which is what was kind of happening with statistical MT. But I think we're using our skills to build up more valuable resources and create more valuable products than just strings. Did I get there? Halfway? Okay. Thanks for your support.
Can I add to Ishvan's question? In the late 1940s, 1950s, in this part of the world, there was a number of terminologists who were suggesting very similar things. They were suggesting that you start off with random terms, then you get to a concept, and it seems very similar. And they were suggesting that by doing that, we would be better able to do things in manufacturing because we're better able to explain it and whatever. And they also proved the point. It was much more valuable to do the terminology right, but it never caught on to the extent that they thought it was. There's, one company in the world, SAP, that seems to me to be really good at terminology. Everybody else plays lip service.
Yep.
Will this be the same, or is there extra value?
I don't think so. Actually, what I think what's going on now is that we have concrete data to show the value of this kind of terminology work. So the impact on search, for example, is huge. Okay, when you search it, this is what we have in LinkedIn. When I started, was doing 95% string-based search. And when I left, it was doing 95% entity-based search. So we had an entity ID that could appear on the surface in any language, in any spelling, in any variation, like this. But we had the resources to aggregate those so that when you identified that this is the entity we're looking for, we could find it 100 times better. Okay, this is just search. We did the same thing for recommendations. We want to match people like you and me with job openings. The same thing. The biggest blocker there is the variation in terminology and phrasing and all of these things. And we use knowledge graphs at LinkedIn to get past this problem. So this is the standard way of improving search, is moving towards knowledge graphs, using knowledge graphs to aggregate synonyms, for example, and variants, and show how they're related. Okay, you want uses of this product. Cool, here you go. You want parts of this product. Okay, here you go. It's much more structured search. Yes, Peter. Oh, you were just waving at me?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I have a question about the relations between facts and concepts. So you mentioned that both facts and concepts can be labeled as IDs, right?
They are, yes.
Yes, and what about the relations themselves? Are they also ID'd?
Yes.
And the next question then is, what happens when the relation isn't real? For example, it's in a figurative meaning or humor, anything like that. So can this be also ID'd, or do we need to create a knowledge graph based on the different types of relations?
So yes, we need to create them based on different kinds of relations, but your example is a perfect example of why we need language professionals, so that we can resolve the metaphor. What was meant by this metaphor was this. And we can use that, describe that in the meta-language terms. And we have these two things so that we can express the same ideas in a range of different ways. Okay, it's not straightforward. We know this. This is our job. So thank you for the example. That's a perfect one. Yes, sir.
Wait, just wait 1 second, because nobody will hear you.
Just wait 1 second, he says. Okay. I thought he was talking to me.
I'm coming from a very naive point of view. I was very struck by the similarities between a knowledge graph and the sort of vector space of a large language model.
Yes.
And one thought that occurs to me is that the type of training necessary for a large language model, the type of training data is relatively straightforward.
Very straightforward.
To prepare.
It's raw text.
Still cost intensive.
Yep.
But the sort of training data, if you like, that you would need for a useful knowledge graph is going to require much, much more intensive preparatory work.
Yes. So we have two things. One is we can use the knowledge graph as input to building LLMs. So we do things like graph neural networks that we build based on this. Yes, the preparation time is more intensive, which means that the resources that we build are more valuable. And they're worth the intense extra labor because they're more reliable and more reusable than raw text for LLMs. So we get the best of both. It's been shown in the research literature that if we use knowledge graphs as input at any of the steps of developing an LLM, it helps. As raw data from the beginning, as guiding the training algorithm to decide what's relevant is what's not, in filters, in evaluation, at any step of the way, it helps. So your intuition is really spot on. And this is, I think I mentioned at one point that they're really complementary. So this is, the way things are going is to merge them. And this is a very, very active area of research. Yes, Ben?
Hi.
Hi.
I would like to know what's the file format that you use to create these knowledge graphs?
Yeah.
Because you mentioned
It's called plain text.
Oh, okay.
You ever hear that one?
No.
Wait. Oh, here we go.
Thank
So
you.
when you download Wikidata, 20 billion lines, if you like, it's available. It's just ID, 3 columns in a flat text file. That's all. Very simple. Okay, so this is the standard format that's most widely used. It's the triple format. The knowledge graph that powers Apple Siri is actually a quad format. So it's the same triple, but a reliability score after that. How reliable is this fact? Because they use that and manipulate it. Instead of just saying true and false, they say it's very likely. So there are a range of other formats, but this is the most widely used one, and it's the best place to start. Okay, thanks for the question. This is actually an even better question than it seems, because this kind of triple, it works for very simple kinds of facts and does not work for things like events. Jack sold his car to Steve for $500. We can put that into a triple. There's too many parts to it. Okay, so there's an alternative format called hypergraphs, knowledge hypergraphs, which is used for these more complex ones. Cool?
Any further questions? Well, I'd like to end by thanking Mike. I think it was an excellent presentation.
Cool.
And the reception shows this, so thank you.
Cool. Thank you.